All running injuries are the same, at least in the sense that all running injuries require the same three things in order to get back to full training. So, in today's show, I'm going to share with you what those three things are and how you can apply them to your own injury in order to get back to full training. To do this, we're going to use a metaphor of a mountain climber who wants to get to the top of a mountain. So if we imagine we've got our budding mountaineer and he's at base camp and he wants to climb to the top of the mountain. So if he's going to climb up that mountain, he's going to need three things. The first thing he's going to need is strength. So if this guy is like a frail old man who is so weak he can barely get himself off the floor when he falls over, then there's no way he's going to have the muscular strength to push himself all the way to the top of a mountain. So the first thing our mountaineer needs if he's going to get to the top of the mountain is strength. The next thing he's going to need, obviously, is endurance, because if he is very strong, but he can only go for like 5 minutes, he's not going to be getting to the top of any mountain. So he's going to need that muscular strength, and he's going to need the endurance, the physical fitness in order to push himself all the way up to the top of the mountain. And finally, he's going to need support. Now, this could be very proximal, close support, like a Sherpa who's guiding him, or a team who's climbing with him, most commonly. But also, he's going to have more peripheral support. He's going to have gear that was made by people who live nowhere near him. He's going to have maps that were developed by people who are nowhere near him. He's going to have different tools that are used in order to get up the mountain, like GPS phones and such, to keep him safe, that he will have had help from other people that are essentially part of his support, but that he'll never meet. They're very peripheral to him. So they're the three things that our mountaineer needs if he's going to get to the top of the mountain. He needs strength, endurance, and support. And these are the three things that any injured runner needs if they're going to ascend the injury mountain and get back to full training. And it doesn't matter whether you have runner's knee, shin splints, Achilles tendinitis. It really doesn't matter. It's always those three things that you need in order to get back to full training. So let's break that down a little bit. Let's say you have a runner who has runner's knee. Runner's knee is a term that's typically used to refer to patellofemoral pain, which means pain on the back of your kneecap. The bit that's hurting is the cartilage that lines the back of the kneecap. That's where the pain is coming from. So when you place more stress on that part of the body, on the back of the kneecap, than it can adapt to, it will become sensitive and painful. And if this continues long enough, it will become damaged. So if you have a runner with runner's knee or pain on the back of the kneecap who can't run more than about 5 minutes without the knee pain stopping them, what do they need in order to get back to full training? The first thing they need is strength. Strength in their leg muscles specifically, because when they're running, each step they're going to have to absorb the impact and then use their muscles to propel themselves forward. And if they don't have sufficient muscular strength, the stress from landing is going to be absorbed by the joints and the bones because it doesn't have anywhere else to go. So the runner needs muscular strength to help absorb the impact and propel themselves forward when they're running. That's going to help ensure that the tissue in question, which in this case is the back of the kneecap, is not going to become overloaded because it's overburdened because the muscles aren't pulling their weight. Next, the runner's going to need endurance. And in this instance, I'm not really referring to the kind of physical fitness endurance. I'm talking more about endurance or tolerance or resilience of the kneecap itself. So as I mentioned, the back of the kneecap is going to need to tolerate a lot of stress. About 3 times our body weight is experienced as stress in the knee joint with each step as we're running. The actual cartilage on the back of the kneecap needs to be able to tolerate the stresses experienced when running. In that sense, it needs endurance, it needs resilience, it needs toughness, it needs to be able to withstand those stresses in and of itself. And finally, the runner with runner's knee is going to need support. Now, that might just be as simple as having like a diagnosis and a little bit more information about how to train. It could be very simple. You could get that from something like this podcast or other YouTube channels. However, if it's a major injury, which is really put the runner out of running for a while and they're really struggling to make any progress, then they might need a lot more involved direct support. So working with a coach or a physiotherapist or a team to help get them back to full training. So just like the mountaineer, the injured runner with runner's knee, pain on the back of the kneecap, needs strength in their muscles. They need endurance or resilience in the tissue itself. and they need support in some form. Let's take another example. Say a runner has Achilles pain, or Achilles tendinopathy is the correct term, or Achilles tendonitis is a really common name for it. But the short version, their Achilles hurts when they run. Let's say the problem isn't as bad as the runner in the previous example, and they can run like 20, 30K a week. But if they try and go up to 60 or 70K a week, the Achilles tendon gets flared up, gets painful, and they can't run for a week or two. So now we have a different tissue. This time it's the Achilles tendon, which is made of collagen. And we're not talking about the back of the kneecap or the cartilage on the back of the kneecap, right? So completely different tissues. But what does this injured runner need? So first up, they need strength. Particularly their leg muscles need to be strong enough to absorb the impact and propel them forwards as they run. If their muscles are weak, the stress will go into other places and the Achilles tendon will experience more stress than it otherwise would. The Achilles tendon itself is going to need endurance or resilience or tolerance. It needs to be able to withstand the stress of running. And the injured runner with Achilles tendonitis is going to need support, whether that is something quite light in terms of just a little bit of advice from an experienced runner or a slight change in their training habits because they read something online that was helpful. Or if it's a more major injury, working with a team of physios and coaches who are going to guide them every step of the way back to full training. Okay, so two different pathologies, pain on the back of the kneecap, pain in the Achilles tendon, but the strategy and the things that the runner needs to get back to full training are the same. So let's take one more example. Let's go with shin splints. So this time, the tissue in question is the tibia, which is the shin bone, and it's the bone that's hurting. So it's not cartilage, like on the back of the kneecap. It's not a tendon, like in the Achilles tendon. It's a bone this time. Now, what does this runner, with shin pain when they're running, they're limited to, let's say their long run is at 20K, and they would like it to be up to like 35. But they can't run that long because of shin pain. What do they need? How do they get over this? First up, they need strength. Their muscles need to be stronger in order to absorb more of the impact and propel them forwards with each step as they're running. If the muscles aren't strong enough and powerful enough, more stress will be experienced by the tibia, the shin bone, because the muscles aren't taking that stress for it. The tibia, the shin bone itself, needs endurance. It needs resilience to the impact of each step when running. It needs to be able to tolerate that impact without becoming sensitized and painful or damaged. And finally, the runner with shin splints, they need support in some kind. Maybe it's just knowing what shin splints is and a little bit about how it behaves and how to rehab it so they can do it themselves, quote unquote, even though they still needed that information. Maybe they are having a really bad time with shin pain and have been for a couple of years. And again, they need a team. They need doctors, sports physicians, physiotherapists, coaches to help guide them all the way back to full training. So now we have three completely different tissues, and I picked some of the most common running injuries, okay? Runner's knee, pain on the back of the kneecap in the cartilage, Achilles tendonitis, pain in the Achilles tendon, and shin splints, shin bone pain in the tibia. And the approach to rehabilitation, to getting back to full training, is the same in all three cases. We want to make the muscles stronger. We want to make the tissue in question more resilient, give it more endurance, if you will. And all of these runners are going to need support. Either a little bit of support or a lot of support. It depends how bad the problem is. And you could say, if we're climbing Injury Mountain here, how big is the mountain? How bad is the problem? Because the bigger the mountain is, the worse the injury is, the worse the problem is, the more support they're going to need in order to build more resilience and more strength to be able to get to the top of the mountain and get back to full training. So let's talk about how you might do it. Now, we've got lots of episodes of this show where we talk in detail about the nuance of how to get back to full training from injuries. However, what I'm going to do here is just give an overview of the general strategy you're going to use to develop each of these three things. All right, you need to make your legs stronger, okay? Let's go with some general rules. You're going to work out 3 times a week doing weights. You're going to do exercises like squats, deadlifts, and calf raises. You're going to make sure the weight is so heavy you can't do more than 8 reps, and you're going to do 3 to 5 sets of 5 to 8 reps 3 times a week, heavy weights, squats, deadlifts, and calf raises. Now, that is a very simplistic program, but it's a lot better than many runners do as part of their rehabilitation strategy, and it will actually make you stronger. And when your muscles get stronger, they can help absorb the impact when you're running, they can help propel you forwards, they can help protect that injured tissue so it doesn't get overburdened by the stresses of training. So how do you build endurance in those tissues? So whether we're talking about the back of the kneecap, the shin bone, or the Achilles tendon, or some other injured area. The first step is to figure out how much stress it can tolerate right now. Essentially, this would be figuring out where you are on the mountain, because you need to know where you're starting from. So it might be that you can only tolerate a tiny bit of running, like running on the spot for 30 seconds 3 times, in which case that's where you start. It might be that you can tolerate quite a lot of running, that the Achilles tendon, let's say, has enough resilience, enough endurance to run for 45 minutes. But if you go over an hour, that's where you start to have trouble. So that's where you're going to start. And as I always say, running is the rehab. If you are trying to rehabilitate an injury and you don't have a specific strategy to progress systematically the running that you're doing in terms of speed and volume, then it's not a very good plan. So each week you're going to try and add a little bit more from where you're at. Whether you're starting way down at the bottom with only a tiny bit of running, or quite far up, maybe able to do like 50K a week and you want to get all the way up to doing 70K a week. But whatever it is, you're going to slowly and steadily add more volume and more speed to your training over time, staying within the adaptive zone. So not too much, not too little, just enough to stimulate it to get stronger and more resilient, have more endurance in those tissues until you can progress it all the way back to full training. In that sense, running is the rehab when it comes to building endurance in the injured tissue. But then what about support? How much support do you need? Really, this is a simple question. Are you making progress? Are you happy with the rate of progress? If the answer to those questions is yes, you have enough support. Maybe you just needed enough information to know like what the problem is, or maybe you don't even care as long as it's getting better. In that situation, you have enough support. But if you're not making progress, if you're stuck, maybe the injury hasn't gotten any better in the last month or so, or if you don't feel confident that you can get back to where you want to go, so back to full training or back to the level of racing that you want to hit without additional help, or if you just don't feel confident that you can do it with the amount of support you have right now, then get some more. And that's where we might come in. So if you have a large injury mountain to climb, so whatever your injury is, if you've been out for a while and you're worried that you're not going to be able to get back to where you want to go, back to full training or back to a certain level of racing, doing it on your own, we can help. This is what we do. We teach our athletes how to build the strength and build the endurance and walk them through it step by step so they can get all the way back to full training. And we become their team. We essentially help guide them up the mountain all the way back to full training. So we're the guide, we're the team, we're the support in that instance. And if that sounds like something you need or you think you need to get back to full training, then we want to talk to you. So click the link in the description to book a free call. Otherwise, I'll leave it there for today. So just remember, all running injuries are the same. You need strength, you need endurance, and you need support.